An oft-forgotten fact in discussion of naval history is that the Italian Regia Marina had one of the single largest submarine arms in the world. Possessing 115 submarines upon entry into the Second World War, the Italian fleet was only surpassed in raw numbers by the Soviet Navy. Although, Italian industry would prove completely incapable of building up from this baseline. The result, naturally, being that the Italians were quickly surpassed as the swarms of U-boats came from Germany and the United States Navy began pumping out fleet boats. Nonetheless, Italy entered the war with a strong submarine force that was, in general, some of the finest in the world. Not without flaws, of course, but generally quite fine submarines that were admittedly hamstrung by poor operational doctrine and issues with diving when necessary. Even so, an interesting fact remains here. The most successful non-German submarine of the war was an Italian submarine, one Leonardo da Vinci. With 120,243 tons to her name, she surpasses her closest competition, the much more famous USS Tang, by just shy of 4,000 tons. As it would turn out, though, she sank less ships in absolute terms. Nonetheless, Da Vinci was a very successful submarine in her 3 years of service. Let's look at how that went for her. Launched on September 16, 1939, Da Vinci was one of the last Italian submarines completed prior to the declaration of war. The second of the Marconi class, she was fairly large for her day, at around 1,500 tons submerged. That hull carried one 100mm deck gun, four 13.2mm anti-aircraft guns, and 8 21-inch 533mm torpedo tubes, 4 in the bow and 4 in the stern, giving an equal amount of firepower in either direction. With 12 torpedoes aboard, she could do quite a bit of damage given the opportunity. Her surface speed of 17.8 knots and submerged speed of 8.2 knots could give her that chance, though she was by no means the fastest submarine of her time. Especially when, as previously mentioned, it came to submerging. With those technical features out of the way, her early service career would prove to be less than successful. Certainly there was no hint of what would come, though this is hardly uncommon for submarines in either world war. Da Vinci began her active service by sailing out into the Atlantic upon Italy's entrance into the war in June of 1940. This was with the destination of Bordeaux, where Italy had their own U-boat pens for 28 submarines, with Da Vinci one of the ones assigned to the base. Those submarine pens are, to this day, still there, and apparently partially restored for social events. This initial voyage would see her make several attempts on Allied shipping, though they would all fail, either because she was spotted by aircraft and had her targets warned off, or just plain by being outrun by those targets. On the upside, to even get out into the Atlantic, Da Vinci had to sneak past Gibraltar, even getting spotted by a pair of British destroyers, although for once an Italian submarine managed to crash dive properly and evade attack. Da Vinci would arrive in Bordeaux by the end of October, where she would then set out on her first 3 war patrols, all 3 of which saw no success, including an attempt at a British convoy off Ireland, which she missed due to navigational errors in December of 1940. Her other patrols would be marred by mechanical trouble, or just plain not finding any targets. Evidently tiring of this lack of targets, her 4th patrol saw Da Vinci move to the waters west of Gibraltar, a much more lucrative, albeit much more dangerous, hunting ground. This was in June 1941, and a sign of this mix of danger and opportunity came quickly enough. For Da Vinci sighted a British aircraft carrier, but was unable to press the attack due to the ship's escorts. As such, it wouldn't be until June 28, 1941, that the submarine finally saw her first success. She hit the British flag tanker Aris, a ship of 8,030 tons, with 4 torpedoes. There is some level of irony here in the fact that this tanker was apparently of Italian construction, though I suppose it's not the first and probably won't be the last time that a submarine sinks a ship built by its own country. Following this, she would find no further targets. Da Vinci was targeted herself by a Catalina flying boat in August, but evaded any damage. That being said, Da Vinci's luck at avoiding damage would continue to manifest in an equal lack of luck in dealing damage. Her fifth patrol saw no success, and after a change of commanding officer, she set sail for the waters off Brazil. This was a distant hunting ground, especially for an Italian submarine, but much the same as U-boats would see great success off the American East Coast, it was hoped that Da Vinci would have more luck off Brazil. As it would turn out, this would happen. On her sixth patrol, and within 3 days of each other, Da Vinci sank 2 freighters, a small Brazilian ship on February 25th, and a Latvian ship of similar size on February 28th. Between the two, that was another 7,201 tons to her total. Now, with a metaphorical taste of blood in the water, Da Vinci's 7th patrol would be far and away her most successful to date. This time she would sink 4 ships in June 1942. A Panamanian schooner, a Danish freighter, a Dutch freighter, and a British collier. Multinational targets of opportunity here that added up to a further 19,997 tons of shipping. Now at over 35,000 tons sent to the bottom, Da Vinci was already becoming one of the most successful non-German submarines, and she was just getting started. Is what I would say, but with her successes racking up, the Italian Navy decided she was the perfect submarine and crew for a special mission. One of the most famous uses of Italian special forces in World War II was the attack on Alexandria that crippled Queen Elizabeth and Valiant. A similar, albeit much more ambitious plan was put together in July of 1942 to do the same, but to New York City. Da Vinci was modified to carry a CA-class midget submarine across the Atlantic. This was somewhat analogous to a British X-class, and the plan was for Da Vinci to carter across the Atlantic so Italian frogmen could do what they did best: planting charges on oblivious ships to blow them sky high. Tests carried out in August of 1942 showed that Da Vinci was capable of carrying, launching, and recovering the mini-sub, though the odds of actually recovering it weren't exactly high. It wasn't by any means a plan to cause lasting damage, either. It was a plan to shock the Americans and force them to guard against the follow-up, regardless of if such a follow-up would ever actually happen. As it would turn out, the initial attack also never actually happened, though not because the Italians gave up on the idea. Because, during the process of testing the submarine, Da Vinci gained another commanding officer. I am not even going to attempt to butcher his name, though, so I'll put that on screen here with a picture of the captain. This man would prove to be her most successful officer, and indeed, Italy's most successful submarine ace of the war. Under his command, Da Vinci left on her 8th war patrol, while the New York mission was delayed for a year. With her deck gun returned to her, having been removed for the mini-sub tests, the submarine returned to the Atlantic, and, once more, would see a string of successes, this time all within a few days of each other. First, on November 2nd, 1942, she sank a British freighter. Then, on November 5th, a Greek freighter. 5 days later, a third ship fell to her torpedoes on November 10th, this time an American Liberty ship. By this point, Da Vinci had been so successful that she ran out of torpedoes, so on November 11th, 1942, she had to finish off her final target, a Dutch freighter, with her deck gun. Guess it's a good thing she got that put back aboard, though definitely not so good for the Dutch crew. These 4 ships added a further 26,042 tons to her total, bringing Da Vinci up to 61,270 tons at this point. Her upcoming 9th patrol would prove to be her most successful by far, however. Operating off the coast of Africa this time, the Italian submarine found her largest target yet, in the form of the Canadian ocean liner turned troop ship, RMS Empress of Canada. On March 14, 1943, Da Vinci stalked the troop ship and fired torpedoes into her flank. The Canadian ship sank fairly quickly, taking 392 men down with her. This former ocean liner, displacing 21,517 tons, was nearly equivalent to Da Vinci's entire 8th patrol in just one ship. Of course, in this, any loss of life is tragic, but there was an extra layer of tragedy here. Among the men carried aboard the doomed troop ship were Italian prisoners of war. Over 100 of those lost in the sinking would be those POWs, killed by their own nation's submarine. As it is, though, Da Vinci's patrol continued, and she claimed another victim in the form of a British freighter. Moving from the Atlantic to Indian Ocean at this point, Da Vinci proceeded to sink 4 more ships in April. A Dutch freighter on April 17th, another British freighter on April 18th, another American Liberty ship on April 21st, and her final victory, a British tanker, on April 25th. Her final victim would be a ship almost identical in displacement and type to her first victim. Her first sinking was a tanker of 8,030 tons, and her final was another tanker of 8,078 tons, both of them flying the British flag. There's probably a certain irony to this. In any case, though, Da Vinci, now at 120,243 tons of shipping sunk, set off for her French home port. She would never make it back. On her return trip, Da Vinci was spotted by the destroyer HMS Active and the frigate HMS Ness off the coast of Spain. The veteran submarine submerged and attempted to evade attack, but her luck ran out at this point. The doggedly determined British ships would, eventually, sink Da Vinci with depth charges on May 23, 1943. There were no survivors. Her crew were treated as heroes back home, and her captain was posthumously awarded both the Italian Gold Medal for Military Valor and the German Knight's Cross. Thus ends the story of Leonardo da Vinci, the submarine. Her planned mission on New York was cancelled with both the Italian armistice and the lack of another submarine to carry the mini-subs. As such, her legacy remains the sinking of 17 ships, displacing 120,243 tons between them. This is, admittedly, less ships than USS Tang, though in large part because of Empress of Canada, a few thousand more tons. As such, she remains the most successful non-German submarine of the Second World War. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and I'll see you in the next one.